Right, I want to do something a little bit different with the Patreon exclusive video this time, because rather than talk about loads of different things, I just want to talk about this and the video that I made about it, the Schaub Lorenz Music Centre 5001. Since the video was quite successful, it's generated a bit of a buzz in various different ways, and I just wanted to cover off some of the things that people were interested in this additional video. Now, some of these things I could have included in the original video, but it was 30 minutes long anyway, and I think people's attention spans were already starting to wane. Looking back at the stats, the average percent viewed was 50%, so that tells you something about that. But then again, that's the same on all the videos. I know you might be thinking, well, the Patreon credits at the end might have some bearing on that, and I think on the short videos they do, but they're only like, they're probably like, I don't know, 5% or something, so yeah, there's a lot of people drop out before the end. So let's cover off some of those things. Now, I've got to apologise for the lighting. It's terrible. This was a major problem with trying to shoot this thing in here, because this is a conservatory, which is a room with a glass roof and glass walls. I put all the blinds down. I don't have any blinds for the roof. When the sun gets to a certain point, which is pretty much whilst I'm awake, daytime, once it's come up over the top of the apex of the house, it shines through here, and there's these terrible shadows everywhere. Right, here comes the sun again. Oh, don't know what to do about this. When the sun's behind a cloud, it's great. It's perfect lighting. It's like everything lights up, but that doesn't happen. Well, it hasn't happened this year for a couple of weeks. We've had some nice weather, which is great for everyone else, but terrible for trying to shoot anything in here. So I ended up having to take all the furniture out, the couch, all the rest of it, just to shoot this, and then put it back in every evening before the missus came home, because why is this a tea in the, I can't get through the house and stuff. So it took me about 4 days to shoot it. Also, when I do these videos, I always do the bits to camera kind of ad-libbed. I've got an idea as to what I want to cover, but I don't have it written down in front of me. I don't have an auto cue or any of that business. And as you know, I've got diabetes, and certain days when my blood sugars aren't quite right, I really struggle with words. I trip over saying things. My mouth kind of can't get the words out. It's kind of so anyway, that first day I got about a 30-second shot, and I spent a whole day on it, and that was really frustrating. Anyway, I carried on over the weekend to fill in extra time, got it all done. So it all worked out in the end. And the video's been successful. But yeah, sorry about the weird lighting, but there we go. I can't put this anywhere else. I'm not taking the couch out again. Now, I noticed there'll be a few new patrons watching this, hopefully. I've got perhaps 100 new people joined up since that video. I did mention at the end that patrons were the people that paid for it. I don't like to go around sort of begging for things. I'm not starving. I'm not destitute. But patrons have become more and more important as ad revenue has kind of, well, I'm not going to say dried up, what would you say, sort of dipped a bit. Looking year on year, on YouTube now, I'm earning 25% less this year than I was last year. Now, bear in mind that subscriber numbers have kind of grown during that time, and video view numbers have stayed roughly the same. 25% drop in revenue. Well, not many people could take a 25% pay drop. Luckily, the job I had before this paid so poorly that anything is as good as that. So I can carry on, but yeah, patrons are very important. So hello to the new patrons, you're helping out. Now, the history of this, not the history of the company and all that, but the history of me getting hold of one of these, I had to look it up because it was a while ago since I got this. In fact, you'll see, I've got notes here just to remind me of all this stuff. You'll have seen it in a July 2018 Patreon behind the scenes video. I think that was the big behind the scenes video I did that I promised to do, when I got to a certain point. And I think towards the end of that, I say, I've got this thing here, I'll show you that later, it's fascinating. So that was July 2018, so that's the first time you've seen it, but it was sort of the back of it. I actually got it in November 17. Back in January 16, so that's like 3.5 years ago or so, a chap posted a comment on the Sony 5-tape player. It was a, I don't know if you remember it, it was a 5 carousel cassette tape player. Anyway, on that video, a chap called Edward Norton, not that one, posted a comment and he said, oh, you should check out the Schaub Lorenz Music Centre 5001. I mean, I get loads of weird comments, but, you know, when there's something pops up, I think, well, I haven't heard of that one. Normally it's, hey, have you heard that you can record hi-fi audio on VHS? That's I mentioned that last time. There must have been a dozen of those on this video. But yeah, when someone posts something, I thought, oh, I don't know. I'll have a quick look. Now, more often than not, it's just nonsense and rubbish. But this was a good one. I thought, well, I don't know about that. So I read up on the Schaub Lorenz 5001 and put a save search in on eBay to search for that term, Schaub Lorenz Music Centre. And I've got to mention here, you know, everyone always criticises pronunciations of everything that I say. Apparently Schaub Lorenz is wrong, even though that's exactly the way they said it on their advertisement. In fact, on their advertisement, if you look for one on YouTube, you'll find the advertisement, the people going, ITT, Schaub Lorenz, and then the guy goes, the Schaub Lorenz. So the actual, there's two pronunciations in their own advertisement.
ITT Schaub Lorenz. Benim televizyonum ITT Schaub Lorenz. ITT Schaub Lorenz.
But I'm carrying on with Schaub Lorenz because it's easier for me to get my teeth around. But yeah, I put a safe search in for it, and it eventually turned up, one for sale. I mean, there've been a couple, but they're always broken, in need of repair. Now, this Edward Norton chap who emailed me initially, he said, I was working on repairing mine for years before I got it working. And he's a guy that does a lot of repairing things. Now, I'm not people think that I'm sometimes trying to sort of come across as a guy who's telling you what to do. It's the opposite. I often try and show that a person who doesn't know what they're doing, like me, is able to sometimes fix things. That's the concept. It's hard to explain concepts of YouTube channels to people because they'll make their own opinions, and even if you try and sort of explain what the idea was, they'll disagree with it. But the idea was that I'm just a bloke who has no formal training, technical ability or skills in repairing anything, but he'll give it a go. And sometimes the things are so simple to repair that even someone with my level of ability can repair them. Now, that's not the whole channel idea. There's loads of different videos and things that I'll show, but whenever I do a repair video, that's what I'm trying to explain, that just give it a go. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? If something's broken and you have a go with it and you can't fix it, well, it's still broken. You haven't changed your situation, but you might find, oh, hold on, this wire's loose, solder it on and the thing works again. It's that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm not trying to show you how to like expertly repair things, you know, like somebody on a show showing you how to take apart a carburetor on a car or anything. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just some chap. I've worked in offices for years. I don't know about electronics. But yeah, the idea with this is where I keep going off at tangents. Sorry about this. Well, I know that's kind of how it is, isn't it? But yeah, he took years to repair his. So I thought, oh well, I don't want one that's broken. If a guy knows what he's doing, it's taken years. So I kept my search open, and eventually in November 17, one turned up at it seems to be like a charity or just a second-hand shop, because they said on the advert it was like, this came from a house clearance in Bristol. I'll put it on the screen. It'll probably say completely different to what I remember it to say, but it said this came from a house clearance in Bristol. When we got it, it wasn't working. Our engineer managed to get it working, so we're selling it, you know, as a working one. So there you are. First one I've seen working, £250 plus £50 postage. So that's the one I bought November 17. Now when it arrived, of course I had a massive box, and the guy's like trying to push up the drive, and I've got it on one of those trolleys with wheels on and all that. Stuck it in the garage for a bit, brought it in the house, plugged it in, wait for it to like go bang or something. It didn't do. Radio came on, but I couldn't seem to work the tape mechanism. It didn't seem to do anything. And that was what I was interested in, because on the advert again they said there were old recordings on it, which is what I was looking for. After going on the website I Love Schaub Lorenz or whatever it's called, that was one of the features that was interesting to me, that these things often contained old recordings. So it didn't seem to work. I thought, oh, I've got loads of other things to do. I'll have to look at that another day. Maybe something's fell off in transit or whatever. So I stuck it to one side, and I've been sort of walking around it in my small studio room for ages. It's been on its end. And anyway, eventually, mid-18, I got the opportunity, so perhaps 6 months later, I thought, well, I'd best have a look at that, because I've got to decide, am I going to be able to repair it, or am I not? Am I going to put it in my storage locker, or what am I going to do with it? Anyway, it seemed to work then. I realised after I was playing around with it and sort of pressed a few buttons, nothing seemed to be happening. I walked out of the room, probably get a cup of coffee or something, and then I heard it playing. And that's because of that big long gap at the start of the tape. So it has to get past that, and then the person hadn't recorded anything on a lot of the tracks. So it finally sort of starts, oh, it's playing, brilliant. And I had to jump around. I thought, oh, there's loads of music on here. Great, I'll do this in the future. So again, I put it back to one side and did a load of other things. And it's played at the back of my mind because in my head, this is probably the most interesting thing to me of all the things that I've shown and possibly ever will be able to show. Yes, the Tefifone was fascinating as well. I don't want to do a high rank, this is better than that. But you know, as the things that I had in the house that I hadn't featured, this was like, oh, that's going to be brilliant, that one. That'll make a really interesting video, as long as it works long enough and keeps working to make the video. But I didn't want to ruin it. I wanted to spend some time on it, because it's kind of like, you know, you've got something golden there. You don't just want to throw it away. You want to make an effort with it. So that's why it's taken all the way till now for me to get into, because I did a few videos ready for my holidays and came back from a holiday, and I had a bit of leeway because I kind of made, I think I'd had about 4 videos, and I came back and got about a week where I didn't have to do one. Then one of them was half finished. I could do that one quickly. So I ended up getting myself perhaps about a 10-day spell to get and do this video. So that's why it's taken so long. But yeah, it was all down to Edward Norton, not that one. But yeah, the things that made the video a success for me, particularly interesting to me, were... This shadow is terrible, isn't it? Sorry about that. Maybe I should sit over here. Let me just... No, that's worse. When I was... Obviously, there's the website. I love Schaub Lorenz Music Centres, or whatever it's called. I'll put the link on the screen every time I say it, because I can't remember what it is. But when I started looking for it, as I always do, I do Google searches for old magazines, old books, photo, image searches, and then from the image searches follow it through to what the website was that posted that image and things. I don't really want to post other people's images wherever possible, just in case I'm kind of upsetting someone or breaking some copyright and things. But the thing that really worked out was that I found an image that was a page out of a magazine, and the magazine then led me to a repository, is that the right word, of magazines on a website in the US called American Radio History, where someone had kindly scanned all the copies of this magazine, which later on I think is the one that became Sound on Sound, about sound recording technology for like professionals. But originally it was called The Tape Recorder, and it started in 1959, and they've scanned them all the way through. And this was in the May 1968 edition. There was a review of it, and that told me a lot of the things that I needed to know about the tape speed and all the rest of it. So he did a review of this, and I thought, well, if this guy's reviewing this... Oh, he also mentioned at the beginning that this wholesaler in the UK had got 800 of these imported into the UK. That was information that I haven't got anywhere else. So 800, I've got a number now. That's how many made it into the UK. But then I thought, well, if he's doing this whole review of it, and he talks about it being a defunct thing from '65 that hadn't sold and all the rest of it. I thought, well, maybe the advert for the company that's selling them's in the same magazine. So I looked through all the PDF of the magazine, and sure enough, there it was. And then that advert, I used it prominently in the video because it told you about the price and how much it had been and how much it was, which was information I didn't have before. So then from that, I could then go into the price of pounds, shillings and pence and guineas and how it converts to modern day prices. So that was a whole section. And then from there, of course, because I've got that magazine, I can also look at the price of tapes and include that in the value of the machine. So there was a whole load of stuff that came off that initial search. And this is how these videos end up being fascinating to me, because I start off with a thing that then leads me down a whole route of stuff, which ends up with me having, I've now got the links to these tape recorder magazines, which is incredibly useful, because whenever I've been doing videos in the past, I've always had to use sort of old billboards and things, which really aren't all about hi-fi equipment and tape recorders and things. You know, they'd feature a little bit. And trying to find the prices of things back then it was difficult. And of course it's in dollars and the exchange rate was really bizarre back then. So it doesn't quite work. So now I found a magazine full of UK prices from the 50s, 60s and 70s. So that's useful. I've got to say also there's a website, hifiarchive.info, I think, which I've used plenty of times. They had a brochure for this from 1965 on there with the pictures that I could then slot in, showing the machine being advertised. Very useful to be able to just include some extra pictures rather than just me sitting here all the time like I'm doing now. Did I mention, I don't know if I have done, that these things had a 90% failure rate, apparently, according to the website I've linked to. Now, of course, all that's hearsay and things, but that was down to engineers at the time who dealt with the repairs for the ones that had been sold in the UK through the wholesaler. So I don't know whether he ever made any money on them. I mean, they bought 800 of these, and if he had to repair, I don't know, what's 90% of 800? If he had to repair that many, then he's going to have, I'm going to have to do this now. Well, 10's 80, isn't it? So 720, isn't it? So if he had to repair all those, imagine the cost of that. I don't know if he'd have to ship them back and then ship them back out again, but he probably never made any on. So Schaub Lorenz never made anything on it. Probably the wholesaler didn't make anything. Weirdly enough, as well as that guy, there's an advert that's on that website that shows it being sold by Lasky's, which was a UK hi-fi retailer. They were selling it a little bit cheaper. If you look in the advert, it says, "We have bought all the stock, all the remaining stock." But then there's also an advert for Lasky's selling them. Now, whether the wholesaler dumped them onto Lasky's or something, because he couldn't sell them, I don't know. When I was listening to a radio, more than I do now, which is very little, it was in the 1980s, mostly. In cars, and I used to get a coach to school and they played the radio in that sometimes, and you'd record the charts perhaps off the radio at the weekend, and I'd listen to late night rap shows and things off Piccadilly Key 103. But that was when I was really, even into the 90s and stuff, but that was like when I was listening to radio more than anything else. So it's in the 80s really, and radio tends to play current music. It plays out what's out at the moment, the top 20, whatever it is. And there's these playlists that radio stations have to adhere to, and they can't just go and play any old track. Even if you get, nowadays, you get like Absolute 80s radio in the UK, a DAB station. Mrs. always has it on in the car. But it seems to me like they've got about 50 records, or recordings, I should say nowadays, 50 tracks that they just keep going in rotation. It's very rare that you hear anything that you haven't heard on there for more than a couple of days. And that was the thing in radio in the 80s, and I'm sure it was the same in the 70s and things. They play what's out at the moment. Unless it's a Christmas song. When at Christmas, they'll start playing like Christmas songs from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and they'll play those again. But now, more often than not, they just don't play anything that's more than recent. And it's fascinating when you listen to this to see how artists in the 80s were able to mine the hits of the 70s and re-release them as almost as their own, and nobody noticed because kids like me hadn't heard the earlier version. So, for example, Rod Stewart, I don't want to talk about it. Now, to me, that was played as Everything But the Girl track on the radio. And everyone goes, "Oh, Everything But the Girl," yeah. The thing is, it's only Rod Stewart in 1977, and Everything But the Girl came out in 88. So, about 10 years difference between the two. Now, of course, it isn't a Rod Stewart track. He did a cover of it. It was a Crazy Horse track. It was on their album in 1971, but I had to listen to that before. Didn't really like that version. But I've got to be honest, the Rod Stewart version is better than the Everything But the Girl version to me. But I never played Rod Stewart's version in the 80s. I say never. I mean, some station somewhere would, but I never heard it. So on this is recorded about twice by somebody when they're recording the charts from 77. Obviously, it made it to number 1 in the UK, I think, so it's quite prominently played. But yeah, it just shows you how, like, depending upon when you were listening, that's what you're used to. For example, The Greatest Love of All, or Greatest Love of All without the on it, by Whitney Houston, 1985. You know, I Believe That Children Are the Future, and all that kind of stuff. Well, I'm playing this thing, and it's flipping George Benson singing it in 1977. And the George Benson version it was for a film, I believe, but that was a hit as well in 1977. So that was only, 8 years apart. I'd never heard the George Benson version of it. Now, I know if I'd got a CD of the best of George Benson or whatever, it'd be on there as one of the tracks. But in airplay, never heard that at all. So I'm listening to this and thinking, well, this is a good version. And then I'm thinking, hold on, it's exactly the same, like the intonations and everything, the speed, all of it. And Whitney Houston just did it again. But everyone thinks of it as a Whitney Houston song. So yeah, then I'd listen to, obviously I'm playing various things on here. You have to play it all the way through. So it's a little bit like listening to a record. You can't just sort of fast forward and things. Copacabana by Barry Manilow. Now that's obviously known as a very kitschy type of song, Coca. But I never actually listened to the lyrics before I listened to it on here. And that's a weird song. You just know the kind of chorus, but you know, when you actually listen to what it's all about, you go, I don't make songs like that anymore. Anyway, so as I've been listening to these things, I've been getting the recordings out through the high-low adapter, which I put on the back, which somebody suggested on Patreon, so thanks for that. I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was. I could look back, but I've got a piece of paper. It's not exactly interactive. It's going to take forever. It's going to take weeks and weeks, this, because as you tune into different stations, when you record off the radio, there all seem to be different volumes. I mean, he's recorded some stuff off Radio Luxembourg, the chap who had this. I say chap, it'll be numerous people. That was really quiet, so you have to turn the volume all the way up for Radio Luxembourg. And apparently it was like a Beatles 1972 marathon they had on New Year's Day, I think.
The big noise in Europe and around the world. This is Radio Luxembourg, broadcasting around the world on 49.26 meters shortwave. FM, VHF channel 6, 18 and 33. And to Great Britain on 1439 kilocycles, 208 meters medium wave with our Beatle Bonanza. For the first and second day of 1972. Nothing but Beatle music. It started at 6:30 this evening, and we're making Beatle music until 2 o'clock in the morning. And we're still with the Let It Be LP, I've Got a Feeling.
So that takes up all the B. So they obviously said it recorded and left it. I think the person who said it recorded probably thought it was a better quality signal than it was. Walked off and it all drifted on them, you know. So and that's how it was so quiet. But I'm jumping around, and the tracks are all at different volumes, and then there's people that they've recorded over things that were already there or stopped early, and it takes forever. And whenever I record anything, I always end up like looking at, I'll have to record that again, so I'll go back and record it again. Truth is, most of it is just music. I mean, you've got to think, people's imaginations have run wild, I've seen in the comments, that they're thinking it's going to be like a major lost archive of brilliant songs or something, or DJ links. And imagine you had a tape recorder in 1977. What would you do with it? You'd probably record the charts off the radio or some music off the radio. And then when the DJ spoke, you'd press the pause button. Well, it's no different here. That's what they've done. So the vast majority of stuff on here is just tunes being played from the charts.
Manhattan Transfer moving down 14 to 15, and Van McCoy moving from 6 to 14. Cat Stevens at 13 with Remember the Days of the Old School Yard. And moving up the chart, quite a big climb this week for Bo Kirkland and Ruth Davis. You're going to get Next to Me. Rod Stewart's at number 11, having moved down from 8, and here it is at number 10, moving up from number 13, Liverpool Express and Dreaming.
A lot of the recordings on here are of
Radio City.
in Liverpool, Dave Eastwood doing the chart show. Round about 79, I think, 78, 79. Some of the adverts in there are going on about fire clearance of stock from the St John's Centre. Well, the St John's Centre fire was in 1979, so it's round about that period. So there's a couple of charts on there. I'm more interested in the stuff in between anyway, the stuff in between the records. And but someone's paused a lot of that out of it. For example, the Kenny Everett stuff, I think there must be like less than 5 minutes of him talking on here, and then perhaps 20 minutes of the music he was playing, and that was it. And that was from a show in 1970. I think that's one of the earliest recordings. There's a bit of John Peel.
And researchers at the Peel Foundation tell me that Robbie Vincent has been playing tracks from this LP on his Saturday afternoon programme. It's by Cameo on the Chocolate City label, and that was called Still Feels Good. The next LP due for release by Ry Cooder is a live album, or is going to be a live album, called Showtime, and in America Warner Brothers have released a couple of tracks from it. Here they are.
Things like the cricket scores, somebody reading the cricket scores for 10 minutes.
And let's start at the Oval, where Leicestershire beat Surrey by 8 wickets. Surrey 220 and 107, Leicestershire 253 and 78 for 2.
Jimmy Young, who was a DJ for ages, a programme with him and a GP talking about acne and mouth ulcers and things.
She doesn't just get one, she gets as many as 6 in 1 week. We've been to the doctor, who gives her penicillin, and that helps her for about a week. Please can you tell me the cause of her ulcers and what we ought to do about it?
You poor old thing, they're very uncomfortable, aren't
Very
they, mouth
painful,
ulcers? Particularly if you're going to eat oranges or something like that, you jump up and down.
If he was alive, I don't know, he's dead, isn't he, I think, but literally, it sounds like it could have been recorded yesterday. The information is exactly the same. There's no kind of historical interest to it. But as far as Kenny Everett goes, that was the one that really got a lot of people's interest. He was a massive influence on a lot of people as far as he was a DJ on various different stations, and then he had a television show, and a massive talent, really pushed the boundaries of what you could do with what he had available to him. He got sacked a load of times because he pushed the boundaries a little bit too far. But the recording from him is from 1970. This was just him talking with a chap, I think the producer, about what was on the telly that afternoon. He said, oh, well, it's a film called Three Little Worlds is on this afternoon, and this, that and the other. And so you can look online. The BBC Genome Project has all the old Radio Times, which also included the television listings for the BBC channels, and you can just search Three Little Words. It tells you when it was on, and it was the 11th of July 1970, so I can tell that that's when that programme was on, because it was on about it being on that afternoon. He got sacked from the BBC the week after. The other reason I know that is because a lady called Stephanie Hurst got in touch with me, who archives all the Kenny Everett stuff she can find, who's sort of putting it all together somewhere. And in fact, there's been at least 2 documentaries about him on the telly, and one sort of docudrama type show, you know, like I don't know, you call it a film. Everyone, sort of actor pretending to be him, and about his life story, that kind of thing. So yeah, massive name over here. But yeah, she got in touch and, oh, I'm interested in the Kenny Everett stuff. And I keep having to tell people, look, there's literally 5 minutes of him talking, if you had it all together, and probably 3.5 minutes of that are him talking about a film that's on BBC that afternoon, which isn't interesting. I'll play it all to you, but it isn't interesting. It's interesting that it's him and it's from that show, but that's what's interesting, not the content.
4 o'clock this afternoon. They've moved it from 3. 4 o'clock Saturday cinema in Gullah. 3 little words, a little, and that's all they gave me. Those 3 little words. Starring Red Skelton, Fred Astaire, Vera Ellen, Arlene Dahl, and Keenan Wynn and Gloria T. Haven, and many more. And it's an MGM musical based on the lives of Bert and Harry, the great songwriting team of the 20s.
So as promised in the video, I am going to share anything that I find on here that's of interest, and at the moment I am copying the audio across, of course, in real time, and also I'm doing a little bit per day in between my other projects, and also I don't really want this thing to be stressed out, so I'm only recording a few tracks worth per day. And quite often there's nothing on a few tracks, and then there's the music on the other ones, and I can't share the music. That's something I've got to point out. There will be no music in any of the clips I share because I don't have the rights to distribute that copyrighted audio. And if you think I might be overreacting a little bit there, panicking a bit too much, no, that's all music labels care about now. After all, it's all streaming, and there's not many people buying CDs, and vinyl sales, while they're up, they don't really match what they used to make on cassettes back in the day and stuff. So all these companies now have got massive departments that are just looking for people who are sharing their audio and going after them. You might remember I had that Gramavox vertical turntable review that had 3.5 seconds of the Ghostbusters theme in there. Just the bit where it says, who are you going to call Ghostbusters? That bit, I'm probably going to get done for saying it like that now. But yeah, they went after me for that, and they said they were sharing the revenue with me. Well, sharing went from me getting about £10 a month on that video to me getting about 20 pence a month on that one. So in the end, I took the audio off and got my video back, all the revenue from it, but it's not gone back up again. I think it's pretty much dead that now. But just look how many people, how many different companies wanted their share of those 3.5 seconds. So yes, if you think that record companies aren't interested in going after this kind of stuff, just think again, that's all they care about at the moment. And that's why you won't be finding any music on any of the clips that I share here on Patreon. I'll give you a little bit of a tip. If you go to a website, officialcharts.com, that's the UK Top 40, and you put in a date, a specific date that you're interested in, of what the charts were, I'd suggest putting something in the 1970s just for this experiment. Say put January 1970. Look down the list on there. Every track that you don't recognise, go on your account with Spotify or Apple Music or whatever it is you use, type it in and listen to it there, and they'll still exist. Those records exist and somebody's monetising them. So yeah, if you hear one of these DJs say, and now here's such and such, the record will be cut out, but you could still listen to that record and it'd be in better quality that it would come through on here. Listen to some old music that way that you wouldn't otherwise hear because it's not getting played on the radio. Now, one thing I did hear on the radio, which was, I say there's a lot of stuff from Radio City in Liverpool, but then this was picked up in Bristol, and it's been around a bit. It's probably travelled around with someone or gone to different people. But yeah, there was an advert for Twilight's Last Gleaming.
Hemdale presents a big new suspense thriller, Twilight's Last Gleaming.
Have no intentions of honoring their commitments.
That's no reason to blow up the whole world.
Bill's bluffing, huh? He doesn't have the keys, huh? He can't launch, huh? I'm singing. Robert, the Dirty Dozen Aldrich, presses the button and blasts the screen apart with a sensational new suspense film, Twilight's Last Gleaming. Certificate AA. Odeon, Liverpool from Sunday.
So I ended up buying it. So Twilight's Last Gleaming with Burt Lancaster and Richard Widmark. I mean, it's a terrible name for a film, and I think that's why I didn't even bother looking at it before. But yeah, that is a film that I heard advertised on the radio. So the advert did work, just like 30 years later. Was it 40 years later? Oh no, it's 40 years later, isn't it? Oh, worrying. So yeah, I've got that to see now. On that Eureka label, brilliant label in the UK, who bring out a lot of old films in really good quality, tidy them up and stuff. So, oh yeah, but the one thing I will say, if you haven't heard it, just play The Greatest Love of All by George Benson. Just get your thing to play that and have a listen to that, and then think, well, I thought this was a Whitney Houston song. Why did nobody tell me this? Didn't manage to do anything with the lighting circuit, by the way. The lighting circuit not only controls the lights, but also the sensor in this that detects the end of the tape and therefore jumps to the next track and starts playing it. Somebody said, well, why didn't you fix that so you could just play the whole thing from beginning to end? You could just set it recording. There's no point. The tracks, I think that was probably broken back in the 70s sometime. So most of these tracks are 20 odd minutes long and that's it. And then the next thing is something else completely. And they're all at different volumes, so it's no use even if it did work and I could say, right, I'll start recording in A1 and I'll come back when it's finished, 09. It wouldn't work. They'd all be up and down in volume. Some would peak out, some would be so quiet you couldn't hear them. So they have to be recorded one at a time anyway, so it doesn't matter, it's not working. Apparently it's using an emergency braking system every time it rewinds because that light isn't shining through. Tried to fix the lighting circuit, had a look at it. All the fuses that are attached to the transformer, I pulled it out, the working. One of them's got loads of stuff around it, which I don't know if that's a problem, but continuity's there on all three of them. One of those is the one for the lighting circuit. So I could sort of look into that more, but I really am worried about breaking this before I get the stuff off it. So I'd rather get the stuff off it and then have a fiddle around with it later. Now after all that, when I've got all the recordings off here that are any use or of interest, and I've got them all archived and I've shared them with you, all the ones that are just not somebody going on about acne for half an hour. Then I've got a chap who I know, Andy, who said he'd be interested in having it. So yeah, that's it. You can see I'm flagging a little bit. I could do with having my lunch. Sorry I've took so much out of your day, but that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.